All right, let's dive into this whole founder mode thing that everyone's talking about.
Yeah, it's pretty hot right now.
It really is. And we're not going to bore you with the basics. You're already deep in the trenches on this stuff.
Right, to the good stuff.
Exactly. So we're going straight for the why, the how, and the what does it even mean. We've got some great sources lined up, everything from Paul Graham's take on it to Airbnb's wild ride, and even some eye-popping stats about founder-led companies in the Fortune 500.
What I find so fascinating about this whole founder mode conversation is that it really challenges conventional wisdom when it comes to management, wouldn't you say?
Right. Oh, absolutely.
It's not just like tweaking a process here or there. It's about like rethinking the very DNA of leadership, especially in the startup world.
And it's gotten real. Brian Chesky over at Airbnb basically came out and said, hey, ditching founder mode almost sank us. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement.
Right.
It makes you wonder how many other founders out there are finding success by kind of quietly ignoring that traditional playbook.
It really throws a wrench in the whole, as your company scales, the founder needs to step back idea. I mean, Chesky's story with Airbnb, especially with their free cash flow being what it is, suggests that sometimes staying deeply involved is the secret sauce.
Yeah, but of course it's not always smooth sailing, right? There are cautionary tales, too.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, look at Nabil Alamgir's experience at Lunchbox, right?
Yeah.
He followed the traditional advice, brought in a bunch of execs, and it totally backfired. Led to layoffs, a whole reset. So it kind of begs the question, if founder mode isn't some magic bullet, how do you know when it's the right approach?
That's where things get really interesting because it's all about nuance.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that there are these different modes of leadership and the context, the situation you're in is everything.
It's not about micromanaging. It's about the founder bringing like their unique vision, their passion. Imagine managing a company from a spreadsheet versus actually feeling every heartbeat of the business.
I love that analogy.
I mean, look at Steve Jobs and Apple, right?
Yeah, a classic example.
Say what you will about his style,
Yeah.
but you can't argue with the results.
Absolutely not.
And I think that's what gets people excited about this idea, is that founders have this deep, almost intuitive understanding, that gut feeling. And that's something that traditional managers often lack,
You
right?
hit it on the head.
It's that fire under the belly kind of passion. They're not just building a company, they're on a mission.
They're all in.
But that level of intensity, I mean, it can be a double-edged sword, can it?
100%. While passion can be a founder's superpower, it can also lead to tunnel vision.
Oh, for sure.
They can get so focused on their initial vision that they miss crucial shifts in the market or just become resistant to new ideas, new ways of doing things.
It's like that saying, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Exactly. And that can be dangerous.
Founders get so used to calling the shots, they almost forget how to build a team that can thrive as the company grows.
And that is a recipe for burnout. For the founder, for the company, it's not sustainable.
Not at all. So it seems like the key here is knowing when and how to transition out of that founder mode and into something more sustainable, right?
100%. And that's something we'll definitely be unpacking as we go deeper. But before we get there, we have to address the elephant in the room when we talk about these different leadership styles.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say. Gender?
You got it. We can't ignore it. It's one thing to discuss founder mode in a vacuum, but the reality is women in founder mode often face very different challenges, different perceptions than their male counterparts.
It's not a level playing field.
Not even close. Women like Whitney Wolfshard from Bumble and Sarah Moskoff over at Winnie, they've been incredibly vocal about the double standards they've encountered.
It's like the rules of the game are just different.
It's like the rules were written for someone else. The same behaviors that are lauded in a male founder are suddenly viewed with skepticism, even suspicion, when exhibited by a woman.
It's like this implicit bias that creeps into every evaluation, right? Adds a whole other layer of complexity. Makes you wonder how much the pushback against founder mode in general is really rooted in these unconscious biases, rather than an objective analysis of the style itself.
Such a critical point. And it highlights why these conversations, uncomfortable as they may be sometimes, are so crucial. We have to bring these biases to light if we ever want to dismantle them.
Well said. Okay, so we've set the stage a bit, explored some examples, and acknowledged that, yeah, there's this gender dynamic at play too. I think it's time we dive into the data. What do you say?
Let's do it. So there's this one study we looked at, founder-led companies that made it to the Fortune 500 Want to guess their median return?
Oh, man, I don't know, a couple 100%.
Maybe. Try 11,129%.
Wait, seriously, are you messing with me?
I'm not. 11,129%.
That's insane. Over 20 times higher than other companies on the Fortune 500.
Yeah.
Are you saying sticking with founder mode is the key to, like, absolutely crushing the market? There's got to be a catch.
Well, there might be. We have to remember this data is only showing us the companies that actually made it to the Fortune 500, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't include all the founder-led businesses that didn't quite hit that level of success. So there could be some survivor bias happening here.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Just because a company is founder-led doesn't mean it's automatically going to become the next Google or Amazon. What about those companies that didn't make it? What happened there?
And that's what I find so fascinating. Because while this data point doesn't tell the whole story, it does make you think, what is it about these successful founder-led companies? It's probably more nuanced than simply founder mode versus manager mode.
So what are we missing?
Yeah.
What other things might be contributing to these companies' success, even with the founder being really hands-on?
Well, for one, there's the whole thing about access to capital. Did these companies have an easier time attracting investors? Was it the industry they were in?
Right.
Or maybe the overall economic climate at the time? Even cultural factors can play a huge role.
So unpacking those questions might give us a more complete picture,
Yeah,
rather than just assuming it all comes down to the founder being super involved.
exactly.
It's not a simple equation. Founder mode and massive returns out. There are way too many other things at play.
100%. We have to be careful about drawing these direct lines.
Okay, fair enough. But even with a healthy dose of skepticism about those numbers, there's still something intriguing about these founder-led success stories, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, something is clearly resonating with this approach.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it comes down to the unique strengths that founders bring to the table. There's this inherent understanding of the company's DNA, right? An ability to make quick decisions, a knack for spotting opportunities that others might miss.
It's that gut feeling we were talking about earlier, that deep, almost instinctive connection to what the company is all about.
Exactly.
But we talked about how that passion can also lead to tunnel vision. And that can be a recipe for disaster, especially as the company starts to grow. Now, how do you find that balance? How do founders figure out when it's time to shift from being the doer to being the leader?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. But a good starting point is recognizing when that intense founder mode approach is actually creating more problems than it's solving.
So what are some red flags that maybe, as a founder, you should be looking out for? When does that passion, that drive, start to become counterproductive?
Well, ask yourself, are you feeling constantly burnt out, overwhelmed, like you're always the one putting out fires? Are you struggling to delegate tasks, to trust your team to make decisions? And what about being resistant to feedback? Or new ideas that maybe challenge your initial vision?
So basically, if you find yourself clinging to control at the expense of your own well-being, or even the company's growth, that's a sign that something needs to change.
100%. You've hit the nail on the head. It's about recognizing that sometimes that intense hands-on approach, however well-intentioned it might be, can actually hold the company back from really scaling and evolving.
So it's not about abandoning founder mode completely. It's about, like, evolving it, finding a way to channel that passion, that vision, but in a way that allows you to build a team that can thrive as the company grows.
You said it perfectly. It's about understanding that leadership isn't static. It's about adapting, about shifting your mindset even to meet the changing needs of your business.
I always say, so how does a founder make that shift?
Yeah.
How do you go from being the one calling all the shots to building a team that can actually share that responsibility?
It starts with trust. Founders have to trust that they've built a team that has the skills, the context, the commitment to make good decisions.
And that trust is earned, not just given freely, right?
Exactly.
Which means, as a founder, you have to be willing to let go of the reins a bit. Let your team make mistakes, learn, and grow.
It's about embracing those growing pains as part of the process.
Which I imagine can be terrifying for someone who's so used to being in control of everything.
It's a vulnerable position to be in, no doubt about it.
So practically speaking, how does a founder start to actually cultivate that trust and empower their team to take on more responsibility?
Well, communication is key. It's not enough to just delegate tasks, right?
Right.
You need to make sure your team understands the why behind those tasks.
Connect those dots.
Exactly. Help them see how their individual contributions fit into that bigger vision.
Because without that shared understanding, you end up with all these different departments operating in silos. And that's not going to work.
Exactly. You need everyone moving in the same direction. And beyond just communicating the vision, it's about creating a culture where feedback is welcomed, where everyone, regardless of their role, feels comfortable sharing their ideas, even if those ideas challenge the status quo.
Oh, that's so important. It's about fostering that culture of healthy debate, right? Because let's face it, the best ideas don't always come from the top down.
100%. You need that diversity of thought, that willingness to challenge assumptions.
It sounds like making this shift from that super hands-on founder mode to something more collaborative, it requires a whole different skill set. It's not just about being passionate and driven. It's about becoming a leader who can inspire, who can motivate, who can empower others.
It's a journey, a challenging one, but a rewarding one.
It really is. And it's a journey that I think a lot of founders, especially if they've tasted some initial success with that intense go approach, might not even feel equipped to make.
I agree. It's a whole new set of muscles that they need to develop.
So where do they even begin? Where can founders go to learn these new skills, to start making that transition?
That's such a great question, and something we are going to unpack right after the break.
So we've talked about how tricky it can be for founders to transition out of that intense founder mode, but for a lot of them, it seems like just knowing where to start is half the battle. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling stuck in that hands-on approach, but they know deep down they need to evolve as their company grows?
It's tough, right? It's like trying to upgrade your operating system while the computer's still running. But one thing I always tell founders is don't underestimate the power of other founders.
Well, that makes sense. Who better to understand those growing pains than someone who's actually been there?
Exactly. Connecting with a mentor, maybe joining a peer group. Those can be game changers. It gives you that safe space to, share your struggles, get advice from people who get it, learn from each other's experiences.
So building that support system is huge. What about more formal learning opportunities? Are there programs or courses specifically for this kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. There are tons of great books out there, podcasts, even online courses specifically designed for founders who are ready to level up their leadership skills.
Awesome. So there are resources out there, but I imagine there's also a pretty big mindset shift that needs to happen. Right? It's not just about learning a new set of skills. It's about redefining what it means to be a successful founder.
You hit the nail on the head. For so many founders, their identity is so intertwined with their company that, the thought of letting go of even a little bit of control can be terrifying.
Yeah, it's like they equate being hands-on with being valuable.
Exactly, and that can be a dangerous trap. The real measure of a founder's success isn't how much they can do themselves. It's about how effectively they can empower their team to achieve those goals. It's about making that shift from I need to do everything to I need to build a team that can do everything, maybe even better than I can.
It's about becoming the architect, not just the builder.
Love that.
Which kind of brings me back to this question I've been pondering this whole time. If this collaborative, empowering style of leadership is so effective, why is it still so often misunderstood, even discouraged, especially in those more traditional business settings?
That is a great question, and I think it boils down to a few things. First, there's this deeply ingrained belief in the hero CEO myth. That idea that a company needs this single, charismatic leader calling all the shots.
It's the Steve Jobs effect. We see those larger-than-life figures, and we assume that's the only way to reach that level of success.
Exactly. But what we often forget is that even those so-called hero CEOs, they didn't do it alone. They had incredible teams behind them.
It's about recognizing that true leadership is often more about empowering others than it is about wielding power yourself.
I agree more. And then I think the other piece of the puzzle is that traditional business structures, they're slow to change. They're built on these hierarchies, these rigid lines of authority.
It's that if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality.
Right.
Even if the world around them is changing at lightning speed.
And because this more collaborative approach kind of disrupts those traditional power structures, it can be really threatening to the people who benefit from the status quo.
So it's like founder mode, when done right, is inherently disruptive, not just to old school management styles, but to the power dynamics that have shaped the business world for ever.
Now you're getting it. And I think that's why it's so important to keep having these conversations. We need to challenge those outdated notions of leadership and make space for these new, more effective models to emerge.
Absolutely. Well said. So, to wrap things up for you, our amazing listeners, it seems like founder mode isn't just about a specific way of managing a company. It's about a fundamental shift in how we think about leadership, about success, about the founder's role in this ever-changing business world.
It's about understanding that the most effective leaders, they're not afraid to challenge the status quo, to empower their teams, to continuously adapt and evolve as the world changes around them.
It's about building companies that are not just successful in the short term, but sustainable, innovative, built to last. And honestly, I think that's something worth striving for. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you've walked away with a lot to think about, maybe even a little inspired to approach leadership in a whole new way.